The room didn't just go quiet, it went dead silent, like someone had sucked all the oxygen from the universe. 23 guests stared at the pregnancy test in my trembling hands while my husband's chair crashed backward as he hit the floor like a fallen tree. But this isn't the story you think it is. Let me rewind to 3 hours earlier, when I was floating on cloud 9, completely oblivious to the nuclear bomb my mother-in-law was about to detonate at my own baby shower. I'm Sophia, and at 7 months pregnant with my first child, I thought I understood betrayal. I thought I knew what family drama looked like. I was so naive it's almost embarrassing. Because what happened that Sunday afternoon didn't just destroy my baby shower. It shattered 3 generations of family lies and revealed a conspiracy so twisted that even soap opera writers would call it unrealistic. The pregnancy test wasn't mine. It was hers. That morning started like something out of a Pinterest board. Pale pink balloons bobbed against my living room ceiling, rose gold streamers caught the April sunlight streaming through our bay windows, and the dining table groaned under towers of perfectly wrapped gifts. I stood in our kitchen at 8 a.m., wearing my favorite maternity dress, navy blue with tiny white flowers, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. My husband Blake was assembling a diaper cake with the concentration of a brain surgeon, his dark hair falling into his eyes the way it had since college. "Babe, does this look even to you?" he asked, holding up the 3-tiered creation like it might explode. I laughed, my hand instinctively moving to my rounded belly. "It's perfect. Everything's perfect. Famous last words, right?" The doorbell rang at exactly 10:30, and I practically floated to answer it. My mother-in-law Vivian stood on our doorstep looking immaculate as always, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a cream blazer that probably cost more than my car payment. What I didn't notice was the predatory gleam in her eyes, like a shark that had just caught the scent of blood in the water. "Darling," Vivian swept into our home with a kind of dramatic flair that made everything feel like a stage production. Her arms were loaded with gift bags, but her smile felt sharper than usual, like a knife wrapped in silk. Blake appeared from the kitchen, diaper cake balanced precariously in his hands. "Hey Mom, you're early. I wanted to help set up," she said, but her eyes were already scanning our living room with the intensity of a general surveying a battlefield. After all, this is such an important day for our family. The way she emphasized important made my skin prickle, but I brushed it off. Vivian had always been dramatic. I should have trusted that prickle. It was my intuition screaming that something was terribly wrong. Blake's father had died only 3 weeks ago after a long, draining illness. Yet here was Vivian, glowing, vibrant, almost revived, as though his death had breathed new life into her. For the next 2 hours, guests trickled in like a parade of pastel-colored joy. My sister Rachel brought homemade cookies shaped like baby bottles. My best friend from college, Natasha, flew in from Denver with a suitcase full of organic baby clothes. The living room buzzed with that special energy that only comes from women celebrating new life. Laughter echoed off our walls, and the air smelled like vanilla candles and fresh flowers. But Vivian? She moved through the crowd like a predator. I caught her watching me with an intensity that felt calculating. Every time I opened a gift, she studied my reaction like she was taking notes for an exam. When I unwrapped the gorgeous wooden crib mobile for my cousin, Vivian stepped closer. "That'll be perfect for the nursery," she said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes cold as winter. The first nursery, anyway. The first nursery? What did that even mean? I was about to find out in the most shocking way possible. Gift opening time arrived like the main event at a circus. I settled into the designated chair, our cream-colored armchair draped with a pink sash, while everyone gathered around in a semicircle of expectant faces. The gifts were perfect: a high-tech baby monitor, soft blankets that felt like clouds, tiny clothes so small they seemed made for dolls rather than humans. Each present made the reality of impending motherhood feel more real, more thrilling. Blake sat beside me on the couch, occasionally helping with stubborn ribbons, his hand finding mine during the sweet moments when emotion overwhelmed me. This was everything I'd dreamed of, surrounded by love, preparing for our first child, building the life we'd planned since our wedding 3 years ago. Vivian waited until the very end, holding back her gift like she was saving the best for last. Or the worst. "I have something special for you, darling," Vivian announced, stepping forward with a small, elegantly wrapped box. The room's chatter died down as everyone focused on this final moment. The box was tiny, maybe 4 inches square, wrapped in pristine white paper with a silver ribbon that caught the afternoon light. It felt expensive, weighty in a way that suggested significance. "This is something every woman in our family needs," she said, her voice carrying an undertone I couldn't quite place. "A tradition, you might say." Blake straightened beside me, and I caught something flicker across his face, confusion mixed with what might have been dread. That should have been my second warning sign. I untied the silver ribbon with trembling fingers, hyper-aware that 23 pairs of eyes were watching my every movement. The white paper fell away to reveal a plain cardboard box, the kind you'd find at any pharmacy. My breath caught in my throat. Inside, nestled in tissue paper like a precious jewel, was a pregnancy test. Not just any pregnancy test, a used one. The little window showed 2 distinct pink lines, bold and unmistakable. The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees in an instant. Conversations died mid-sentence. Someone's wine glass clinked too hard against a table. "Vivian," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the sudden silence. "What is this?" Her smile widened, showing teeth that looked sharp enough to draw blood. "Surprise, darling. You're getting a sibling-in-law." That's when Blake hit the floor. The sound of his chair crashing backward echoed through our living room like a gunshot. Blake's 6 feet 2 inches frame crumpled to the hardwood floor, his face pale as printer paper, eyes rolled back in his head. But here's what made Vivian's revelation not just shocking, but medically impossible. Blake's father had passed 3 weeks ago after months of intense chemotherapy and morphine treatments that would have made conception utterly unthinkable. And in that heavy silence, the real drama began. Chaos erupted. My sister rushed to check his pulse while Natasha grabbed a glass of water. Someone was calling his name, but it sounded like it was coming from underwater. I sat frozen in my chair, still holding the pregnancy test, my brain struggling to process what Vivian had just announced. The positive test belonged to her. Blake's 50-year-old mother. The woman who'd gone through menopause 2 years ago. "How is this possible?" my mother gasped, voicing what everyone was thinking. Vivian's smile never wavered. "Life finds a way, doesn't it?" The smugness in her voice made my blood turn to ice. Blake came to slowly, his eyes unfocused and confused as the women helped him sit up against the couch. The first thing he saw was his mother, still holding that test like a trophy. "Mom," he croaked, his voice raw with disbelief. "Tell me this is some kind of sick joke." 3 weeks along, she announced to the room like she was revealing the winner of an award. "Conceived just before your father passed. A final gift from him." The implications hit the room like a tsunami. 2 babies. Born 2 months apart. One to the son, one to the mother. Blake looked like he was going to pass out again. The medical impossibility was staring everyone in the face, but Vivian was counting on family politeness to prevent anyone from voicing the obvious questions. The math didn't add up. And Vivian knew it. The rest of the baby shower dissolved into whispered conversations and early departures. Guests mumbled polite excuses while shooting glances between Blake, Vivian, and me like they were watching a train wreck in slow motion. I caught fragments of hushed conversations. Wasn't Richard on hospice care? How could she possibly? The timing doesn't make sense. After the last guest left, Blake and I sat in our living room among the scattered wrapping paper and abandoned gifts. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Our baby won't inherit everything," Blake finally said, his voice hollow with realization. "If my mom has another kid..." The Ashworth family estate was worth $12 million. Blake was supposed to be the only heir. Not anymore. That night, Blake couldn't sleep. I found him at 2 a.m. sitting at our kitchen table with his laptop open, scrolling through legal websites about inheritance law and estate planning. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, running his hands through his hair. She's 50 years old. She went through menopause. And Dad. Dad couldn't have, not in his condition. How is she pregnant? But as I watched him spiral, a different question was burning in my mind. Why had she chosen my baby shower to announce this? Why make such an impossible claim in front of 23 witnesses? This wasn't accidental timing. This was strategic. I started my own research that night. What I discovered about Vivian's recent activities made my blood run cold. She'd been planning something far more twisted than anyone could imagine. 3 days of digging through Blake's family photos, medical records I probably shouldn't have accessed, and social media stalking revealed a pattern that made my skin crawl. Vivian had been orchestrating this deception for months, but not what she wanted us to believe. Her recent grief counseling sessions, actually appointments at a fertility clinic 2 hours away. Her sudden interest in holistic healing and nutrition, preparing her body for artificial procedures. Her casual questions about our baby's due date and inheritance discussions, pure reconnaissance. But the smoking gun came from her Instagram account. Hidden in her stories from 8 weeks ago, 5 weeks before she claimed to conceive, was a single post, a photo of fertility vitamins with the caption, "Never too late for new beginnings," followed by a winking emoji. She'd been documenting her deception while pretending to mourn her husband. Blake's father had died 3 weeks ago, leaving everything to Blake as the only child. But if Vivian could convince everyone she was carrying his posthumous child, the inheritance would split. Our child would go from sole heir to sharing $12 million. The timing was surgical in its precision. Make the impossible claim at my baby shower for maximum emotional impact. Use family grief and politeness to prevent medical questioning. But what Vivian didn't know was that her little revelation had awakened something fierce in me. I was about to make her pay for weaponizing pregnancy against my unborn child. I spent the next week gathering evidence like a detective building a case. Every fertility clinic visit I could trace. Every suspicious medical appointment. Every social media post that revealed her true timeline. The fertility clinic receipts were the golden ticket. Vivian had been paying for advanced fertility treatments, the kind that cost $15,000 per cycle. And the dates? They started 2 weeks after Blake's father entered hospice care, when everyone knew conception was impossible. This wasn't a miracle pregnancy, it was a medically engineered deception. But the most damning evidence came from Blake's cousin Trevor, who worked at the family law firm handling the Ashworth estate. "Your mom's been asking questions about inheritance law for months," he told Blake. "Specifically about posthumous children and how they would affect existing wills." She'd been planning this pregnancy with the same strategic precision most people use to plan a wedding. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with an eccentric mother-in-law having a late-life crisis. I was dealing with a master manipulator who'd turned artificial insemination into inheritance fraud. The woman who'd made passive-aggressive comments about my housekeeping, who'd forgotten to invite me to family events, who'd always made me feel like I wasn't good enough for her precious son. She'd just declared war on my unborn child's financial future using a dead man's imaginary sperm. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. Time for Phase 1 of my counterattack. Phase 1 was exposing the medical impossibility. I started with a family doctor, Dr. Gregory Hale, who had treated Blake's father during his final months. A simple phone call under the guise of family planning concerns revealed everything. "Mrs. Ashworth," Dr. Gregory said carefully, "given Richard's condition and medications during his final weeks, conception would have been highly improbable. The chemotherapy alone would have made it virtually impossible." Phase 2 was social media warfare. Vivian was obsessed with her image as the perfect widow, the grieving but dignified matriarch. Her Facebook was a carefully curated museum of respectability, charity galas, book club meetings, tasteful vacation photos from her healing retreats. But I created a detailed digital timeline, every appointment, every social media post, every suspicious behavior mapped out like a detective's evidence board. The pattern was damning. She'd started fertility treatments while her husband was in hospice care. She'd literally been planning to defraud our child's inheritance while pretending to be a grieving wife. Phase 3 involved Blake's extended family. The Ashworths were old money, The kind of family where reputation mattered more than actual wealth. They valued discretion, dignity, family honor above all else. I scheduled coffee dates with Blake's aunts Patricia and Caroline, his cousins who worked in family businesses, and his grandmother Ruth, the 90-year-old matriarch who still controlled significant family decisions. I'm concerned about Vivian, I told each of them, my voice heavy with genuine worry. This pregnancy claim seems medically impossible given Richard's condition. I'm worried she's having a psychological break from grief.
I didn't need to lie.
Just plant seeds and let their medical knowledge do the rest. Within days, the Family Whisper Network was buzzing with impossible questions. Henry Westbrook had been the Ashworth family attorney for 30 years. He'd handled Blake's father's estate and, more importantly, he'd been fielding Vivian's hypothetical inheritance questions for months while her husband was dying. I made an appointment under the pretense of updating our own wills now that we were expecting. But what I really wanted was information. Mr. Westbrook, I said, settling into his leather office chair with my hands folded over my bump, I'm concerned about some questions Vivian's been asking about inheritance law. His expression immediately shifted, becoming more guarded. What kind of questions? Questions about posthumous children and how they would affect Blake's inheritance. Asked while Richard was in hospice care, months before she announced her pregnancy. The silence was deafening. Henry's face went through several expressions: surprise, understanding, then something that looked like professional disgust. Mrs. Ashworth, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting she's been strategically planning to commit inheritance fraud by using donor sperm and claiming the child is Richard's posthumous baby, I said, sliding a folder across his desk. And I have evidence. The folder contained everything: fertility clinic receipts, social media timestamps, medical records proving conception impossibility, witness statements from family members about her suspicious questions. The timeline was damning. Henry reviewed the documents with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen family greed destroy relationships before. After 20 minutes, he looked up with an expression I'll never forget. "This is deliberate inheritance fraud," he said quietly. "Using artificial reproductive technology to create false claims of posthumous parentage. If proven, it's grounds for criminal charges, not just civil action." That's when I knew I had her. Phase 4 was the most delicate, getting Blake on board without making him feel like I was attacking his grieving mother. Friday evening, just us in our quiet kitchen with soft jazz playing and the weight of everything I discovered. "Blake, I need to show you something," I said, sliding my laptop across our dinner table. "It's about your mom's pregnancy. The timing doesn't add up." His face immediately became defensive. "Sophie, I know this is weird for all of us, but she's still my mother. She's grieving. Just have a look." The laptop screen showed Vivian's fertility clinic timeline cross-referenced with his father's medical records, her inheritance questions, and her social media posts. The pattern was undeniable. Blake's face went through the same progression: confusion, understanding, then pure betrayal. "She planned this," he whispered, staring at the evidence. "She used donor sperm while Dad was dying and planned to lie about it. She planned to defraud our kid using a fake posthumous baby." The hurt in his voice broke my heart for him. "What do we do?" Blake asked, looking lost in a way I'd never seen. "She's my mother, but she's trying to steal our child's future with a lie about my dead father." "We protect our family," I said, my hand moving to my belly. "And we make sure she faces consequences for desecrating your father's memory." That weekend, we crafted our strategy. Blake would confront Vivian directly, wearing a hidden recording device, and get her to admit the truth on tape. The plan was simple: let her arrogance and desperation hang herself. Monday morning, Blake called his mother. She had no idea she was walking into a trap. The restaurant Blake chose was perfect: quiet enough for intimate conversation, but public enough that Vivian would feel safe being completely honest. He arrived 15 minutes early, adjusting the tiny recording device hidden in his shirt pocket. Vivian swept in wearing designer sunglasses and a flowing scarf, looking like she was headed to a photo shoot rather than lunch with her son. "Darling, you look terrible," she said, settling into her chair with theatrical concern. Is the pregnancy stress getting to Sophia? Actually, Mom, I wanted to talk about your pregnancy. The change in her expression was immediate and telling. Oh, that. Vivian waved her hand dismissively, but her eyes had gone sharp. I know it seems impossible, but sometimes miracles happen when we're grieving. Miracles? Blake's voice carried an edge I'd rarely heard. Mom, Dad was on morphine for pain. He couldn't even stay conscious most days. How exactly did this miracle conception happen? Vivian's perfect facade began to crack like old paint. I don't know what you're implying. I'm implying that you used a sperm donor, and you're planning to lie about it. Specifically, to manipulate Dad's estate and steal from my unborn child. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Then Vivian did something that shocked even me. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, Blake, you always were too smart for your own good. And just like that, she confessed to everything. Your father left everything to you because he thought you were his only child, Vivian continued, her voice now stripped of all pretense. But wills can be contested, especially when there's a posthumous child who was deliberately excluded. Blake's recording device captured every calculated word. I spent $60,000 on the finest fertility treatments money can buy. Donor sperm from a Harvard graduate, if you must know. Someone who'll give this family a proper heir instead of letting your pregnant wife turn the Ashworth legacy into a suburban furniture catalog. The contempt when she mentioned me was like acid burning through the recording. You think I didn't notice how she's already redecorating your father's house? How she's planning to change everything about how this family operates. This baby will protect our heritage. Blake's hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold his water glass. You destroyed Sophia's baby shower. You traumatized 23 people. You're desecrating Dad's memory. For money. For family legacy, Vivian corrected sharply. That little gold digger you married doesn't understand what it means to be an Ashworth. She sees dollar signs where she should see duty. But my child, my real heir, will understand the responsibility that comes with this inheritance. Besides, who's going to prove the child isn't Richard's? DNA testing? I'll refuse. The timing looks believable enough, and grief makes people accept impossible things. By the time anyone gets suspicious enough to demand tests, the inheritance will already be split. The recording device caught every venomous, calculated word. She'd just confessed to inheritance fraud, defamation of a dead man, and conspiracy to defraud a minor. Blake came home that evening looking like he'd aged 10 years in 6 hours. He handed me the recording device with trembling fingers. She confessed to everything, he said, collapsing onto our couch. The donor sperm, the inheritance manipulation, the plan to refuse DNA testing. She even called you a gold digger and said she'd use Dad's memory to cover up the fraud. Listening to that recording was like hearing a horror movie villain reveal their master plan. Vivian's voice was cold, calculating, completely devoid of any maternal warmth or respect for her deceased husband. But now we had everything we needed for Phase 5. Total nuclear exposure. The next morning, I called Henry Westbrook. We have the full confession, I told him. She admitted to using donor sperm, planning inheritance fraud, and intending to desecrate her husband's memory to cover it up. This isn't just inheritance manipulation anymore, Henry said grimly. This is criminal fraud. Identity theft of a deceased person. Conspiracy to defraud a minor's inheritance. We need to involve the family immediately.
Family meeting, I said.
Time for the whole family to hear who Vivian really is. The final confrontation was set for Sunday, exactly 1 week after the baby shower that started this war. Sunday arrived with the kind of dramatic weather that seemed scripted by the universe itself. Dark clouds gathered over the Ashworth family estate while lightning flickered in the distance like nature's own spotlight. The entire extended family assembled in the formal dining room where 4 generations of Ashworths had made their most important decisions. Blake's grandmother Ruth sat at the head of the massive oak table, her 90-year-old eyes sharp as surgical scalpels. Vivian arrived fashionably late, wearing a flowing dress that emphasized her barely visible bump. She moved through the room accepting congratulations and playing the part of the grieving widow carrying her beloved husband's final gift with Academy Award-worthy performance. She had absolutely no idea she was walking into her own trial. "Before we begin celebrating," Henry announced, standing at the far end of the table with a briefcase full of evidence, "there are some serious legal matters we need to discuss regarding this pregnancy." Vivian's confident smile flickered for just a moment. "What kind of matters?" Blake pulled out his phone and placed it on the table like evidence in a courtroom. "The kind where you confessed to inheritance fraud and desecrating our father's memory." The color drained from Vivian's face like someone had pulled a plug. "Play it," Grandmother Ruth commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd controlled this family for 9 decades. What happened next would destroy Vivian's world forever. Vivian's recorded voice filled the dining room like poison gas spreading through every corner. Every single family member heard her cold, calculated confession, the donor sperm deception, the strategic timing, the deliberate inheritance manipulation, her contemptuous comments about me and our marriage. "That little gold digger you married doesn't understand what it means to be an Ashworth." Aunt Patricia gasped audibly. Cousin Michael's mouth fell open. Even the teenage grandchildren looked shocked by the venom in her voice. But it was Grandmother Ruth's reaction that sealed Vivian's fate. The family matriarch's face transformed from confusion to understanding to pure, incandescent fury as she realized the scope of the manipulation and disrespect for her deceased son. "You used modern medicine to defraud your own family," Ruth said, her voice shaking with rage. "You desecrated my son's memory. You weaponized pregnancy against your own grandchild. You turned artificial insemination into inheritance theft." Vivian tried to interrupt, tried to explain, but Ruth wasn't finished. "Get out," Ruth commanded, pointing toward the door with a finger that trembled with righteous fury. "Get out of this house and never come back. You are no longer an Ashworth." "Mother Ruth, you don't understand," Vivian started, her composure finally cracking like a dam under pressure. "I understand perfectly. You manipulated reproductive technology to steal from a child. You planned to use my dead son's identity to cover your tracks. You called my great-granddaughter's mother a gold digger." The room was silent except for thunder rumbling outside like nature's own judgment. The aftermath was swift and absolutely brutal. Within 24 hours, Vivian was locked out of the family estate, her credit cards linked to family accounts were canceled, and her position on the boards of 3 family businesses was terminated. The recording of her confession spread through Chicago's high society like wildfire. The woman who'd built her reputation on grace and dignity was exposed as someone who'd monetized artificial reproduction and desecrated her husband's memory for personal gain. But the most satisfying consequence came from an unexpected source. Dr. Edward from the fertility clinic called Blake directly. "I need to inform you that your mother has been telling my staff that her son is financially responsible for her treatments and fully supports her pregnancy journey." Blake's response was immediate and devastating. "Cancel everything. Immediately. Send all outstanding bills directly to her." "And Dr. Edward? You might want to review the consent forms she signed regarding the donor sperm." Suddenly, Vivian was facing $60,000 in fertility treatment costs with no family financial support and potential legal action for fraudulent consent. 3 weeks later, the inevitable happened. Without family money to support her pregnancy and facing social exile from her entire social circle, Vivian quietly terminated the pregnancy. She claimed it was a miscarriage, but Blake's cousin Trevor, who worked at the medical billing department, confirmed she'd scheduled a procedure at a private clinic. The strategic pregnancy that was supposed to secure her future had cost her everything instead. But the real justice was still to come. The family lawyer called the next week with a final update. Vivian had been permanently removed from all inheritance documents, all family business positions, and all trust fund distributions. "She's essentially been legally disowned," Henry explained during our phone call. "The family has made it clear that her actions constitute unforgivable fraud against family interests." But the sweetest justice came from Blake's grandmother Ruth, who modified her own will to include a specific clause. Any family member who uses reproductive technology, pregnancy, or children as tools for financial manipulation or inheritance fraud would be permanently excluded from all family benefits. Vivian's scheme hadn't just failed spectacularly, it had created legal protections to ensure no one could ever attempt such manipulation again. 4 months later, our daughter Hannah was born on a crisp October morning, her tiny fingers wrapping around Blake's thumb like she was claiming her rightful place in the world as the undisputed Ashworth heir. The Ashworth family embraced her completely. Grandmother Ruth spent hours holding her great-granddaughter, whispering stories about 4 generations of family history that Hannah would inherit without the shadow of fraud or manipulation. Hannah would grow up protected by legal documents that ensured her future security, surrounded by family members who'd proven their loyalty when it mattered most. Vivian sent a single generic card to the hospital. "Congratulations on your new arrival," with no signature. Blake threw it away unopened. 6 months later, I ran into Vivian at the grocery store. She looked smaller somehow. "She's beautiful," Vivian said quietly, gazing at Hannah. "Thank you. I suppose you think I got what I deserved. I think choices have consequences." As she walked away, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, but peace. 1 year later, Hannah took her first steps in that same living room. Blake's family gathered around, faces filled with joy. Her laughter echoed off walls that had once witnessed betrayal. Today, they only heard love. What would you have done in my situation? Hit that like button if you think justice was served, and subscribe for more unbelievable family stories.